to welcome you all to our presentation, Collaborative Creations Across Continents. And I'm very pleased to be joining my colleague, Kirsty Guster, in Canberra, 10,000 miles away. I know it's the wee hours of the morning for you. So our central thesis is that peer partnerships in synchronous distance learning, such as the one that was formalized between the ANU, the Australian National University, and Manhattan School in January of 2011, offers many opportunities for creative collaborations in the performance, education, artistic, and institutional space. Moreover, our experience has shown and demonstrated that such partnerships can also inspire and produce unexpected creative collaborations that either remain in the virtual environment as well as those that move beyond it. So today, Kirsty and I would like to share specific examples of such creative collaborations that will include video examples, as well as discuss some future collaborative projects we envision between our organizations, as well as those we see moving beyond. So I'd just like to take a brief moment and give you a background on this partnership and its genesis. So, believe it or not, if we trace its history back, it started over 10 years ago. This peer partnership started over 10 years ago when Kirsty Guster from the ANU School of Music came to Manhattan School to study piano on a Fulbright scholarship at the MSM. My distance learning program here at Manhattan School of Music was still relatively young, having started in 1996, and Kirsty responded to my posting to work in this very relatively new program. And it was so interesting to me because she was very keen early on to develop the capacity for music distance learning in Australia at some point in the future. So fast forward to the more recent history, and as the newly appointed development officer of the ANU School of Music, Kirsty, now in a position to do so, reached out to me in March of 2009, expressing interest in creating a music distance learning program in Canberra at the ANU. So in 2009, Kirsty, her head of school, Adrian Walter, and the technical team of Niven Steins and Josh Chafee came to New York for a 2-week residency at MSM. And the residency focus was about best practices in synchronous technology for music. Also, how to develop content and how to deliver content. Following that, in May of 2010, I was invited down to Canberra as ANU had indeed created a distance learning program and technology infrastructure 1 year later. Very impressive and quick. So my visit down under was a great opportunity to trial a number of educational exchanges between ANU and MSM and to engage the faculty at ANU in this process, a very critical step in engagement and understanding. As well, we provided the faculty with an overview of what MSM has been doing to engender interest and stimulate ideas of potential possibilities in synchronous collaboration in support of music performance and education. So, after a long period of collaboration, as I've demonstrated, it culminated in a virtual signing in January of 2011 with a strategic partnership agreement, and we articulated our goals in a written document in which we would state we would commit to the best practice of long-distance delivery and high-quality music content, that we would commit to peer-to-peer artistic and musical exchanges, as well as research in pedagogy in the virtual environment, and cross-institutional participation in jury and examination panels in support of international benchmarking. As well, we took advantage of the ANU Vice Chancellor, Ian Chubb, being in New York, so we could connect back to ANU for a virtual signing between our schools and between our countries. So at this point, I would like to show you some video footage documenting this partnership. And what you will see is first the Australian Consul General in New York inaugurating the proceedings. You'll then see a snippet of a virtual performance of the ANU jazz faculty. Following that, you'll see, again, a snippet of an interactive K-12 jazz program. And I just want to mention that it is a simulation, and therefore you have to envision that the audience is usually a group of school children as opposed to adults. And then finally, transcontinental signing of our two presidents. So I know Bruce is in the control room, and I am going to ask Bruce if he would launch the video.
Ladies and gentlemen, this collaboration, this cultural collaboration between our two countries, which renders virtually redundant the traditional tyranny of physical geographical distance, is a sight to behold, as we will witness very shortly. Secondly, it's a wonderful collaboration between the Australian Advanced Research Network, our distinguished and excellent friends at ANU and at the Manhattan School of Music, portaled by Columbia Business School. This issue about data intensity and being able to have real-time transmission with very significant data intensity is something that the ANU and Columbia and Manhattan School of Music are at the forefront of. So this is globalization at work, this is one world at work, and there is mutual outreach by the two exemplary schools that we're witnessing this evening in their performance.
So here's what we're going to do. When we're talking about improvisation, we want the students to know, in fewer words, more notes, what improvisation means to us and what's really happening. Because we make a point to let all the students know, you'll see here on the piano, there are no notes, there is no sheet music, there is no music for either of my colleagues. And we can start with a theme, but from there the music will develop as we would say naturally. So we're going to pick a song that we've found most students know. Now, normally some of you are shouting at this point that you already know the song, but that's okay. We're working up to it. So we say everybody knows Twinkle Twinkle. Everybody's familiar with it, probably learned it as a young child. And instead of worrying so much about chords and chord progressions and notes and extensions and all of the theory and terminology that we get to study here, we let them know that improvisation is more than notes. It can also be about emotion. And we can take a song that everybody knows, we can take a melody that everybody knows, and we can try to convey a different emotion to the students. Of course, we will choose notes, but we will play it with different meanings. So we would like to take a suggestion. This is where you come in as fifth graders. We have a suggestion. Please.
Happiness.
Happiness. Fantastic. So we are going to play this piece with the intent to deliver happiness to you. Dancing is encouraged. Rowan, could you start out with?
Done.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thanks for listening.
Super. Thank you very much. And over to you, Kirsty.
Good morning, good evening, everybody. I think it's coming up to 1 a.m. or something like that here, and I have to say that music The happy jazz scenario did more for me than the percolated coffee on this end. That was great. I have to mention, just before I start my part of the talk, that we have moved very quickly in the last year, in that first year and in the last 2.5 years. And I have to say that was largely due to the support of Christiane and her team and all of the work that they'd already done since way back to 1996. And it's been such a thrill for me to be able to reconnect with you in the way that I do, Christiane, and bring the two institutions together in this way. So today, just to talk a little bit about this collaborative creation concept, we've done a lot of work, we've had a lot of educational exchanges in the last 2.5 years, but I wanted to share with you one particular one which really highlighted or inspired the title of today's presentation. And that started in May 2010 during Christiane's visit to the ANU. MSM faculty member Joanne Pulk gave a video conference lecture and performance into the ANU titled Women Composers Through the Ages. This was an enlightening presentation on women from the Middle Ages through to the 21st century, considering the societal restrictions on women attempting to write music, receive the necessary education, and attract performances and publishers. While this lecture began as what might be considered business as usual now in this partnership, it led to an inspired and creative collaboration over time between Joanne and one of our ANU faculty members, composer and musicologist Ruth Lee Martin. In the following footage, I hope Bruce might be able to put this on in a moment, you will see brief excerpts of Joanne's lecture and performance, and of interest today, the post-presentation discussion in which Ruth and Joanne first share their common interests and the potential is sparked for the future possibilities of this technology to collaborate. Bruce.
So the focus of this presentation is women composers, and the growth of women as compositional scholars mirrors the role of women in society during the time in question. And my main point in this lecture concert is the fact that the more women have access to education, the more they are considered as serious composers as the men. And that's really important. So when we first start looking at women, they're not even allowed to be in school. And as they get more and more educated, they become more and more successful until we get to today, where I'm hoping that there is no difference between whether or not a woman composed the piece or a man composed the piece. So we're going to trace the women throughout the history of music, and we're going to begin to appreciate the struggles for mere access to education that plagued women from the beginning of recorded music history, and to witness the growth of women's contributions to classical compositions as educational opportunities increased. What I'm looking for is there to stop being the differentiation of women composers and just having composers. So now, are there any questions? Does anybody have music for me to play? Just hand it over.
I did my doctoral thesis on Australian women composers, looking at women composers within orchestras, and it was really interesting what you said about having the repeat performances. Yeah. Because the thing that came up is that even with affirmative action, women will get their wonderful premiere, but then the work sinks like a stone and is never heard of again. And that's a real problem. And I wondered, in terms of getting women into the repertoire and not ghettoising women, how do we get women to be performed as just part of standard repertoire?
I think it just boils down to advocacy. I think everybody needs an advocate. I mean, Beethoven had his advocates, and Bach had his advocates, and Mozart had his advocates. So I think it's really a matter of finding people whose voices are women's voices, and just get out there and perform the music and include them in standard repertoire. I mean, I think it's also a matter of talking to the people who are doing concerts all over the world and asking them to include even one piece or two pieces by women.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's that dogged determination, and perhaps I should go to my head of school and ask for a course on women composers. He's here now.
Oh, it's a great course. I've got the entire syllabus if you want to borrow it.
Technology empowering women composers. I love that.
Yes, I do too. I mean, the whole technology here is absolutely remarkable. It's a little strange to be playing where the audience is so far away, but the technology, and also I think I saw Christiane just a few days ago, and there you are across the world. But we can really bridge. I mean, I think we can use this technology to bridge a lot of these gaps that has not been offered before, and it could help promote some women, any composers.
You could be getting your second performance at the same time as your first performance, because it could be a world premiere in New York and a world premiere in Australia at the same time.
That is unbelievable.
All right, well, this is Christiane Orto. It seems, unfortunately, we seem to have lost the ANU, but hopefully we will continue. We will get them back soon, and Kirsty can carry on with her portion of the presentation. But I'll just segue here and say a quote from Dr. Pulk about this collaboration, this particular creative collaboration that we've been discussing. Good, she's back. Isn't that good news? Kirsty, welcome back, and please continue on.
Did you get the bit at the end of the video where Joanne said unbelievable? I wanted to make sure you got that bit. Okay. I loved hearing that when we were looking back at the footage, because unbelievable or not, at the end of that lecture, Ruth pulled me aside. She said, "I would love to write a piece for Joanne." I thought, oh, what a wonderful idea. True to her word, just over 6 months later, in January this year, Ruth sent her score to Joanne. And then in early March, Joanne recorded it and then sent an MP3 via email back to Ruth for feedback on tempi and interpretation. And then in late March 2011, our two institutions held the Intercontinental Virtual World Premiere of Ruth's new piano work, The Winter It Is Past. And that session began with Ruth talking about her composition. And as she explained, in addition to being inspired by hearing Joanne play, it wasn't long after that unfortunately her mother passed away. And this had a direct influence, as she told us, on the motivic and the emotional content of the music. Following a very moving performance of the work by Joanne to a silent and attentive ANU audience, the composer, performer and the audience managed to share then in a discussion about their insights and their reactions to both the music and the medium through which it was performed. And I just thought, if we can test the system again, fingers crossed, to show a little bit more footage, Bruce, just from that session.
In my head, I had this idea of writing a piano piece for Joanne, and then I also thought it might be nice to write something for my mum as well, and just a kind of not a dirge or something that's very sad, but just something that celebrated life in general. There's a very nice story that goes with this piece, because when my mother, she was a singer, as was my grandmother, and when she was 4, she was stood up on a chair. Some visitors came around to the house and they stood Mum up on a chair and she sang Danny Boy. And so whenever visitors came to the house, the chair was trotted out, Mum was popped up on the chair and away she'd go. So I thought, okay, look, it's not my favourite song, but it was very meaningful for the family. So what can I do with the material in this piece? Wonderful. I just love your playing. It's just beautiful.
Thank you.
All these different colours that you've brought out in the piece, and it's so lovely when you write a piece as a composer and then the performer can just take it to the next level. It's just very exciting. I really thank you so much for that.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
I have to say that the presence that you created there was definitely felt here.
Oh,
you could have heard a pin drop.
What's it like for you as a performer just to be given this stuff out of the blue, and there's a composer half a world away who's really inspired by your playing, and then you receive by email the score to a piece that she's written for you. And I'm just wondering what that's like from the performance perspective.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I don't see us as a half a world away. I mean, I think of all of us in the same world, which is the world of music. And I was sort of touched that you wrote a piece for me that was so personal to you. I mean, the death of your mother and the theme of Danny Boy. I happen to love Danny Boy. But, you know, writing something that was very personal to you, I didn't feel like there was a half a world between us, and I didn't feel like there was any language distance at all. I mean, I just felt like you wrote a piece and I played the piece, and I didn't feel like there was a struggle in understanding the language at all. I understood why everything was written. And you know, I think the task of performers today. You know, I think we need to perform the music that's being written today, and communicate the voice of the composer through our art, through the way we can do it. So, to me, it seemed like a very natural progression from having met you a year ago or so in the Women Composers discussion, and it felt very natural.
I think in addition to obviously the very human element that type of collaboration shows, as well as following on from Joanne's lecture, women supporting women through this medium, this was a really good example of the type of interaction that can extend beyond an initial live connection and continue over time to influence those involved and indeed impact the music we make. Additionally, this performance highlighted what a powerful performance space this could be. And many in the audience noted afterwards how moved they were by Joanne's playing, and that the technology really did disappear. And I have to say that over the past year, quite a few of our students have given performances over this medium into regional or remote locations. But this particular example with Joanne's performance was confirmation for me and the audience on our end that it really is possible to have a visceral experience of a live performance from the audience's perspective. I'm not sure, Christiane, whether you got to talk about Joanne's comments about this while I was off air briefly, but if you didn't, would you like to mention those now?
Certainly, Kirsty, and I was just about to but did not, and I'd be pleased to share Dr. Pulk's perspective on this. And I quote, Using video conferencing to unite the opposite ends of our planet opens up a world of possibilities. Why not a series of seminars with composers and performers interpreting new works? An interactive event whereby the performers learn a new piece and perform the piece for the composer while still in the practicing stage. The composer feeds back thoughts and advice. Then the final performance for a wider audience. In that way, the evolution and process of learning a new work and the glorious advantage of actually being able to discuss the understanding and assimilation of a new work with the composer becomes a process for all to see and all to seek. How about going a step further and recruiting a publisher or publish a collection of pieces commissioned and performed via video conferencing? How about a CD issued with pieces learned this way? The possibilities are endless and exciting. Kirsty?
I think Ruth very much shared those views and spoke about this being a fascinating glimpse into the enormous potential of video conferencing. As she observed the atmosphere during that performance, from a slightly different perspective, that it was almost the same, she said, as if the event was taking place in the room we're all sitting in. As a composer, I felt the same degree of excitement combined with slight anxiety that I feel with every premiere of one of my works. These feelings were not lessened at all by the distance. Looking ahead into the future, she's now talking about a choral collaboration using a technology, as she says, to explore the potentials and the limitations, and use the limitations as an important part of the outcome. And I think we've heard other people talking about that as well. As she mentions, the idea of latency can be turned around and used as a feature rather than a weakness. In addition to exploring this idea, I thought it worth noting another suggestion that was raised in that initial meeting, and I believe it was in that footage, the sharing of course content on women composers. I think Joanne at one point offered her course over to Ruth. It's all there for you, she said. And one could potentially envisage a jointly offered course between the institutions, providing the opportunity for international education and exposure for women from both countries. And indeed, an international course such as this has the potential to expand to other continents. Moving away from the focus on women to composition in general, we're really looking forward to an upcoming composition seminar with the president of the Manhattan School of Music, Robert Sirota, in early 2012. And with all of this interest and growing discussions around our staff and students, I just wanted to mention a couple of other examples that lead to future collaboration ideas. An Australian musician currently completing his doctorate at Manhattan School, Steve Newcomb, was commissioned to write a piece for the ANU and recently premiered this work in Australia with the ANU Recording Ensemble. Steve has since returned back to New York, back to the Manhattan School, and we're now looking at the possibility for Steve to work further, to continue the work that he did when he was here with staff and students on his composition and extend this into regional and remote audiences. In another example, I heard that just last week, one of our ANU composition faculty met up with Christian at the World Music Forum in Estonia, where they were discussing the future potential for interaction between faculty and students at both institutions. And this includes joint composition seminars, workshopping American and Australian pieces via distance, and travelling performances of student works. I thought I should pass back over to you now, Christian, just to move on to some of the educational opportunities and challenges.
Certainly, Kirsty, and I know we're running a little bit against time because we want to save time for a few questions, if possible. So yes, moving quickly onto the education space, certainly this is core to what many of us are doing, and we feel it's absolutely essential that we provide our students with more educational and artistic resources with greater frequency and variety. And so we're going beyond the four walls, the paradigm of learning within one's own institution, and developing these peer networks as exemplified with the ANU and Manhattan School. And we're looking forward this year to a harp exchange with Alice Giles from the ANU and Deborah Hoffman from Manhattan School. Similarly, in classical guitar, Tim Kane working with the students here at Manhattan School, and David Leisner on our faculty working with students at ANU. Again, all in the interest of expanding educational curriculum and then putting that into embedding that in the actual curriculum that the students have. So what I'd like to do quickly, because I want to show a short video, it's under 2 minutes, but my point in showing this is to demonstrate some of our core values in synchronous learning. And I first apologize, it is an older video before we had our HD video recording capability, so looks a little fuzzy, but you will get the point. And it definitely shows, first of all, the efficiency of time in this environment, the intensity of focus in the learning experience, and very effective interactivity. And in this video, as I said, the teacher here at Manhattan School working with a young student, Haley Bullock, at ANU, he discusses violin bow pressure, bow division, achieving of focused sound, musical gestures, and phrasing, all in under 2 minutes. So again, this incredible efficiency with which learning can happen. And then as an addition onto that, recording all of this and giving this digital library to our students so they can continue to learn and analyze that exchange over and over as many times as they want, frankly, in their dorm rooms. So quickly, Bruce, if you could show us the video.
When you start, then you can let go. And then again in the string. Or any other way, but to have much more variety in the pressure, and especially to make sure that the attacks are more focused. Can we try the beginning one more time? Sure. Okay, that's much more focused sound. Now, if we can have more ups and downs, like even inside, like when you have a 2-note gesture, the second note could be much smaller. You know, we go here. In general, for me in Mozart, whenever you have a 2-note gesture, the second note is much softer and also a little later. It gives it the right tension. Yeah, let's try one more time.
Okay, give it a go.
Okay, that's already much better. Much better. My last wish for this phrase is to have three layers. You know, the opening. You know. Or another way, but just so they don't all sound the same.
Sure. Okay.
Bravo.
All right, Kirsty, I've just been given word that we have 2 minutes before questions, and I'm sorry to give you that news, but over to you.
Okay, well, I was going to talk about humour over long distance, but I'll leave that one out. I just wanted to briefly mention that in our experience over the last 2.5 years, and I'm sure Christiane has been experiencing this for a lot longer, there's huge potential, and we're all really interested in the potential of this technology. But I think as I heard some of the presentations last night, and the one by Thomas Hampson, where he was noting that we have to keep at the forefront of our minds and our developments the question of how we will enable and foster and potentially expand the core essential qualities of what we want to achieve with the musicians in our pedagogy practices. And I completely agree with that, and I think that I know that Christiane and the ANU are very interested in that as well. But I just wanted to raise, as we finish up, a few other questions or issues that have certainly been discussed around here. And that is, in addition to how this may impact on our pedagogy practices, the question of how it might impact on our institutions. Just to give you a spattering of concepts, is that with the opportunity for joint courses, cross-institutional academic benchmarking, virtual teaching exchanges leading to in-person exchanges or vice versa, and the sharing significantly of our students and teachers. The question for me is, and for us is, what will our degree programs look like in the future? Our students will have access to a greater variety of artistic and educational influences. They're likely to be more independent and empowered, all very good things. How will we help them navigate and manage all these viewpoints? How will educators and institutions deal with and manage all these viewpoints? It's possible to see, I think, that this significantly impacts and challenges the master-disciple paradigm that a lot of classical music is built up around, and indeed does break down the institutional walls. And just one last point, I think in our experience these considerations extend beyond tertiary peer exchanges or peer partnerships such as the one the ANU has with the Manhattan School of Music. And we've already experienced through our mutual work and advocacy in Australia, which has included presentations into regional conservatoriums and schools for the Music Council of Australia, and in support of the new national broadband network here in Australia. There is real potential to extend outreach into regional and remote areas, and even to influence more broadly music education practice and policy. And I'm sure Christiane would be able to talk further on that, but I'll hand it over to you now just to close us up. Thanks, Christiane.
Kirsty, I'm afraid we probably won't be able to get into those particular issues, but I think you've just enumerated very key, important issues about what our degree programs will look like, managing our students' understanding and learning, and this master-disciple paradigm, which I think is being challenged through this virtual environment. So, George, over to you. I think Bruce has to bring your audio up. One moment, George.
I got it. Okay.
There
Can
you
you
are.
hear me now? Okay.
Certainly.
We have a question from Maurizio Ortolani at NAC, and I'd like to ask him to go ahead and ask that, if he would.
I can see the question actually from Maurizio, and he's asking, Christiane, can you talk a little about how telementoring differs from in-person mentoring? What are some of the ways, the characteristics of each helps students learn? And I bet, Maurizio, you could answer that question extremely well yourself, obviously, because of our long-standing and wonderful work that we have with the Art Center, Canada's National Arts Center, of course, our shared artistic resource of Maestro Pinka Zuckerman. So, Maurizio, maybe let's hear your viewpoint on that. Not hearing you yet, but maybe Bruce has to bring you up.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, everybody.
Hello.
Good morning, Christiane, from Ottawa, Canada. Certainly, we always say that the telementoring is not a replacement for in-person mentoring, but certainly we have found that there are incredible benefits, unique characteristics to telementoring. We've found, and Pinkus is the first to say this, that it is a very different dynamic, that the screen for digital natives becomes somewhat of a frame, and there's a distilling effect. There's a focus that the students engaged in telementoring have that makes it a very different characteristic with an in-person telementoring session. Not better or worse, but very different. And their learning seems to be very different. Their engagement seems to be very different. So we find it invaluable, and I know, Christiane, that we share some of the similar thoughts on the value of telementoring.
Thank you, Maurizio. I don't know if there's time, but just a word about objectivity and subjectivity. That's always also a very interesting area as well in the understanding of telementoring.
That's right. That you have this dichotomy and flip between the subjectivity in the exchange of the student and the mentor, and the objectivity, both at once.
Right, which is something maybe you wouldn't get in a live a live lesson. Absolutely.
That's right.
Thank you, Maurizio. It's good to see you. So back over to you, George.
We have one more question from Lenora Helm at North Carolina Central University. And her question is, what were your first steps in bringing this technology and delivery to your campus, and how did you get buy-in from administration and faculty?
Kirsty, why don't you take that one?
I think we were, just to address the second point first, I think we were very, very fortunate that our new head of school, who arrived at the same time as I arrived, had previously done some work with this technology several years ago up in Darwin, at the very northern tip of Australia. So he had previously experienced it and was quite interested in it. So it just happened that I spoke to him about it one day and said, look, I used to work in the video conferencing department at Manhattan School, and this I think it was within a couple of weeks we were putting together plans to reconnect with Christiane. So in that sense, we had top-down support right from the beginning. But I have to say that bringing everybody else on board, there is a resistance. I think some staff, I know that a lot of musicians will have a resistance to this type of technology, and I have to say I think we've managed to convince everybody who had that resistance. So working with the staff has actually been more challenging for us than working with our administration.
Great.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank you both for your presentation, and this will conclude this session. We're going to take a short 2 or 3 minute break, and we'll be coming back at 9:45 for our next session. And I will pass this over to another one of our hosts at Royal College of Music, Tanya Lisboa.
Right, so Tanya Lisboa here from the Royal College of Music, and it's my pleasure to open this session entitled Reaching In, Reaching Out, to present